All right, we're back, and it's COMP 2007 enterprise computing. We're going to be talking about a little bit about cloud computing today, and then we're going to get into the lab piece that I've given you guys. So in the first part of this today, we were given a lab that was due today, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit. But I also want to talk a little bit about cloud and Azure, because I just gave you guys Azure passes for the people that are here. People that aren't here, you're going to have to try and get them another day when you're back. So let's talk about cloud a little bit, and what the cloud is and how it can help us out. So one of the things that's happening lately is that cloud computing has taken on kind of a more important role these days when it comes to computing of all types. And we're not just talking about web stuff. We're talking about that companies are extending their platforms, if you will, or infrastructure by going on the cloud, right? So one of the reasons why we're doing Azure is because I want you guys from the very beginning, and I think the other instructor that's also doing the other sections, Rich, we want you kind of to understand cloud computing, right? I think it's from a skill set perspective, when you're looking at marketing yourselves from a resume perspective, you want to have some kind of cloud computing experience, right? So something like at least understanding of one of them. There's the big three. What are the big three? I'm going to ask around there if you guys know. What are the big three cloud providers right now? Big three. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Those are the big three. Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Not necessarily in that order. This deck that I'm showing you is from a Microsoft Dev Camp, right? We had a Microsoft representative come earlier in the year, and what he did was he kind of talked about cloud. So all I'm doing is resharing this one with you. It's his deck. It's a Microsoft deck, but it's important for us to kind of understand where cloud sits from, and how important it is these days. Definitely, I think we're going to get to the point where we're going to be starting to use infrastructure as a service. We'll talk about that a little bit more and more. Like right now, you're at the point where you're still here in school, and we're used to really using the machine in front of us, right? The machine in front of you, because this is the way we do development. You have a machine that's in front of you that the company's given you, or that you have a personal machine, and you're used to doing all your development in the machine in front of you. But what if, and I'm going to put it out there, what if tomorrow that's not the case at all? That the machine in front of you doesn't have the smarts at all. It's just a terminal, going back to how it used to be 50 years ago, right? Where the smart is in the cloud, right? You don't have your software. You don't have to worry about licensing. You don't have to worry about any type of infrastructure. As long as you have access to the internet, you can develop, right? So think about that kind of, there's a different workflow involved there than we have today. Today we have a workflow where you have a machine and all the smarts are pretty much in the machine in front of you, right? That can propose issues, right? Think about a company. If I have a company and I have to give all of you machines to be developers, right? I have to worry about taking care of your machine. I have to worry about licensing for each of your seats. I have to worry about everyone getting the same upgrade, right? If I upgrade your software. I have to worry about connectivity issues with servers and so on, right? It becomes rather expensive, especially if I have my own server farm. I have to set up my own infrastructure on the back end so you can do your development, all that kind of stuff. Especially if I'm doing things like serving the cloud through my own intranet, right? All that kind of stuff becomes rather expensive, especially for small to medium-sized businesses, right? Right now, if you're looking about in an enterprise scenario, it might make sense to have this idea of a hybrid cloud, where you have an intranet and an extranet, and the extranet is the piece that Microsoft or Google or Amazon will be taking care of. All right, I recommend that you definitely understand. Let's talk about cloud today. And again, this is a promotional PowerPoint, so you're going to see PowerPoints these are the kind of PowerPoints I don't do, like a sales PowerPoint. But it's good to see big pictures once in a while. All right, so let's talk about the cloud a little bit. So again, why the cloud? I think this is a good slide. There's the big three reasons why the cloud is really up. The big three are speed, scale, and economics. Speed, because You're in the cloud, you're up at Microsoft, right? Or Amazon, or Google, or whatever it is. You're going to get way better speed on their cloud than you would from your personal intranet. So if you, or let's say even if you went to another service provider, these big three traditionally have server farms or data centers across North America and across the world, right? So that's the really big thing. Scale. I can scale up. If I have requirements, I can continue to scale up and add additional resources at a click of a button, right? Which is a lot different than buying new servers or provisioning new virtual private hosting and so on, VPS services and stuff. It's a little bit different. With the cloud, you're able to scale pretty much infinitely, right? And you're not paying for the infrastructure. So think about this. I have a server, and I'm serving up an e-commerce site. Today, I might have to, if my e-commerce site gets really, really busy, I can just throttle up, right, with cloud, and I can get more resources, more servers. I can spread my servers and mirror my servers across North America, right? So I don't have one location. And I'm going to get what? 99.99995, right, uptime capability from a quality assurance perspective and the ability for me to stay up and running. So my availability is going to be way higher than if I was going to try and do this on my own. So really good reasons why. And economics, because I can go from a CapEx, capital expenditure model, right, where I spend capital to kind of increase the amount of infrastructure in my company, buy new machines, all that kind of stuff, software and whatever, to an OpEx, operating expense model, where I can actually have a monthly fee that I pay for someone else to take care of it for me, right? Where I have peace of mind that way. So I got Microsoft, Google, or Amazon. They have their infrastructure, and I'm riding on it, and I'm happy because you know what? I don't have to think about all the other stuff, licensing and maintenance and everything else, a cooling room, raised floor, all that kind of stuff that you have to build. If you're building up your own data center, you don't have to do that because they have it for you. So think about this. You have you're hosting the Olympics, okay? So a rather large thing. How many servers do you think you're going to need, right? We're hosting it here in Toronto. We want to win the Olympic bid, right? And we want to host, the Olympics, the website, right? How many users are going to attack that website to get up to date, information for what's going on in Toronto, especially if you host it locally. The gold medal hockey game. There you go, right? That's crazy, right? And there's going to be a time. Think about this specialized event, right? I may not need that kind of bandwidth all the time, right? I can ramp up. I can throttle up for the time it takes for the Olympics. I can throttle up my bandwidth, right? Increase my resources to whatever I need, maximum if I want, right? And I'll have the capability so that Microsoft's site won't crash, right? When people are attacking it to understand what's going on with the Olympics. Same thing with Amazon. Same thing with Google. Again, as your number of users increase, right, we have a spike in demand. We can adjust. And by the way, I don't have to throttle up manually. I can set it up for that weekend so that, you know what? I'm going to continue to throttle as the demand increases. It's going to be responsive to my demands, right? So as demands throttle up, I get more and more users. I reach a threshold. I can poll for the type of threshold I'm getting, and boom, I'm spiking up to the next level. So I like this slide a lot because it talks about the differences between our current model, which is on-premises private cloud, or the old word for that was intranet, right? So this is our intranet. We have to pay for this is from the bottom up, storage, right? Networking fees, I have computing fees. I maybe have a virtual machine. I have operating system licenses. I have to install them. I have to do all kinds of infrastructure stuff. There's runtime issues where I'm running applications. I'm building new applications. I have data and access. I take care of it all. It's all me because I have an intranet. It can be rather expensive for a small to medium-sized business, right? Even for a large business. Think about the capital expenditure. Remember we talked about these two models, CapEx versus OpEx, capital expenditure versus operating expenditure, right? Most companies nowadays, think about even people owning or leasing. A lot of bigger companies are moving away from owning buildings to leasing buildings. Because their business is not in real estate. Their business is to do something. Their business is to produce something, right? So they're moving away from that capital expenditure to sink in their money, to lock in their money into infrastructure. Why would I want to lock my money into infrastructure when I can lock it into operating expenses? It might be a little bit more expensive because Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are there to make money too, right? But then long term, what's my cost of ownership? Sometimes it becomes lower now. This is where the economics come into play. So here's what we call infrastructure as a service, IaaS, infrastructure as a service, right? Well, what the cloud can do is take care of this piece, the storage, the networking piece, the computing piece, right? All that computing piece can happen here at the bottom. They can only take care of this one if you want, right? So basically, you know, you provision cloud services, the vendor he's got his physical fabric is managed by the vendor. So you're still taking care of things like your virtual machine. You have an operating system that you're still installing, but the infrastructure itself, the computers, the servers, all that stuff reside in the cloud. All right. So right there, you've made a savings because you don't have to worry about the physical infrastructure anymore, right? The next thing is platform as a service, right? So now the vendor everything is taken care of by Microsoft except for applications and data access, right? So think data and access. Think about things like my data. My data is physically mine, right? And that's never going to change, even as software as a service. When I go to software as a service, think about software as a service if you think about it as Dropbox, right? Dropbox is a good example of software as a service, right? We use the software, we're consuming the software, but we don't care what's going on, how it's being managed. We don't know where that server resides, anywhere across the world. You don't know but your data, you have access to your data, and it's your data, right? But other than that, you don't know what the magic is going on underneath the hood, you know? That kind of stuff. That's software as a service. That's the extreme right end, right? So somewhere in the middle, which is platform as a service, is where you take care of things like managing your own applications. Like if you were to create your own Dropbox application, right? That would be platform as a service. Your own websites, your own web applications. That's in the middle. And that's one of the most popular levels, right? Platform as a service. In fact, many other smaller cloud providers like OpenShift and Heroku are also offering platform as a service, right? So different cloud models. One thing that Microsoft gives you is access to all this stuff. If you want to set up a Node server, a Redis server, if you want a Visual Studio Online, if you want to use some kind of version control, if you want a SQL server or MySQL, you want to use a Ubuntu server, because Microsoft doesn't just take care of Microsoft servers, right? You can actually create your own, whatever server you need at the time. And we're going to go into some examples of how this works. Right? So all kinds of different kinds of servers is what Microsoft allows. So again, you can create your own virtual machine. Now here's the trouble. From school, I'm going to tell you this in advance. In order for you to, I can create my virtual machine, but I can't control my virtual machine from school because it uses RDP here at school, right? Remote Desktop Protocol, which is a proprietary Microsoft protocol. And unfortunately, our IT department at school blocks it, right? But this is the future. Think about the future. We can't do it right now. I would love for you guys to work 100% in the cloud. That's the future of, I think, where we're going to go, where you can actually, you don't need your computer in front of you to have Visual Studio, right? I can just get you to log into your cloud account, and Visual Studio, the smarts behind what I'm getting you to do your development environment is there in the cloud, right? Other cloud providers do the same thing. Take a look at Cloud9 as another competitive service out there. And there's others that allow you to kind of work in the cloud, right? Again, it's a little bit in your mind, you're like, nah, I don't want to do it. I'm a developer. I like my development tools to be in front of me. Yes, right now you do. Right now you do because you need persistent connections. Right now you do because the internet isn't ubiquitous. It's not everywhere, right? If you're on the bus, you may not have access. If you're on the plane, you don't have access right now. Maybe in the future, though, things are going to change, right? So where it's so ubiquitous, you don't need a cell phone, because cells will be out of date. Cell technology is old technology, right? So imagine everywhere in the world there's a Wi-Fi connection, no matter where you go, right? Today, it's unthinkable. You were like, it's impossible, Tom. There's no Wi-Fi connection all across the world. But tomorrow, why not, And what about even go further? What if you yourself are part of the mesh network, right? You have a wearable device that you use, or your cell phone. Not only does it access the Wi-Fi network, but it regenerates the Wi-Fi network. So wherever you are, you extend the Wi-Fi network to your neighbor, right? These are things that are happening. These are changes that are happening to our environment. Today we're looking at them and I'm talking science fiction to you, right? Tomorrow you're going to laugh because it's going to be something that I'm talking about and then some, right? It's going to go to the next level. So yeah, so we're not used to it. So let's talk about this virtual machines. Is one thing you can do. We can't talk about it too much here in class because we can't access them. But I'm going to show you how to provision a machine in a second. Okay, I'm just going to skip through this one. Again, you can provision different types of machines. You can do a Windows server, Linux, other kinds of types of machine. And once you boot it up and use it, you can access it with remote desktop, which is kind of cool. And there's a different VM gallery that allows you to create different kinds of virtual machines. There's actually, it's almost like an appliance that's been pre-built for you. So instead of you having to create a VM from scratch, virtual machine from scratch, there's actually templates that you can use to provision one automatically, right? And all you need to do is name it, and away you go, right? This is really cool technology, guys. Think about this. I want to build and provision a Microsoft Server 2012, right? I don't need infrastructure, and I don't need licensing. All I do is go in there, select from my gallery, name the server, and it exists online. This is really cool stuff. Right now, again, I'm just showing you the Microsoft piece. Google and Amazon have very similar offerings. There's some more. How about some more? Right? And Visual Studio Ultimate 2013. They have actually the Community Edition. It's already pre-built. So imagine you provision a VM, right, with Visual Studio 2013 pre-built. It's ready to go. It's provisioned for you. You don't have to worry about installation. You don't have to worry about if it's the latest version, does it match, whatever. And of course, you can make your own. If you want to make your own custom version so everybody has access to the same custom version of Visual Studio, you can do that from an enterprise perspective. That's awesome. And everyone's going to have their own instance, right? When they kind of go in, they have their own instance of Visual Studio that's provisioned exactly like yours. So huge savings from a larger company perspective as well, not just the small to medium-sized businesses now, but we're talking about enterprise, right? And this is enterprise computing, after all, right? So we can try the virtual machine. We'll do that in a second, and I'm not going to talk about extensions too much. It's a mobile world. We can create mobile websites as well. I'm not going to cover that today. And by the way, I'm going to share this PowerPoint as well as others on Blackboard very soon. One thing I do want to set up with you from an Azure perspective is let's set up some websites, and let me see if I can get to that piece of the puzzle, because I think it's important we talk about websites, because this is what we're going to be doing here in class, right? And part of your assignment is going to be, hey, how do I set up a website with Azure? And there's a couple ways to do that. And we're going to talk about it to do it two ways. One, straight through Visual Studio, right? I want to do right through Visual Studio. And the other one, I want to set it up right on the cloud. I can do it two ways, right? So let's talk about that. Again, think about different ways of doing things. I have my website, and I can use, again, it can be a .NET, a Python website, a Java website, a Node website, a PHP website, all these different kinds of websites. And I need all different types of server technologies on the back end, different kind of solution stacks, right? Okay. In my own environment, if I'd set it up on my own, and not all providers provide all these, by the way. If you go to your regular provider like GoDaddy, they might not have all these different options, as an example, if they're the host. Or name somebody else. Even Rogers or Bell may not have all these solutions if you were going to go with them and host with them, right? Big companies local, right? But Azure does. And they can supply different websites, right, that you can point to with different domains, and they can handle all that for you. This is a good thing. Again, all providers, all of your cloud providers do that. But we're going to make our website, here's our developers on one end, right? We have our end users on the other end, right? Developers and end users. And here's our Azure website in the middle. But we're going to make a change, right? We want to make sure that we have this staging area. We're going to talk about that in a second. But here's the different kinds of ways you can deploy. You can deploy via Git. You can deploy via Visual Studio Online. Because you have access to Azure, you can also apply for a Visual Studio Online account, which is actually just like a GitHub account that's offered by Microsoft. It's another versioning tool that they use, right? Bitbucket, Dropbox, directly through FTP, all these different ways of accessing your or deploying your sites. And if we want more power, we want a faster site, we want hosting that's going to handle e-commerce, like I told you before, we throttle up. We can go from one instance of your website to multiple instances. When I say multiple instances, that means it's deployed across different servers. So if one server is busy, now the other server is serving you too. The same website. Guys, this is enterprise level computing, what I'm talking about here. This is the stuff that you're going to need to understand as you go into business. Today, governments don't use this kind of stuff yet, and they're a little bit afraid of extending their virtual private networks, if you will, or private networks. Governments, banks.
The newer stuff anyway.
What was that?
They never pick up the newer stuff anyway. They're usually a couple words.
They're a little bit behind, but what's going to happen is these cloud providers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're offering up a service that allows us to extend our own private infrastructures and to create this so-called hybrid cloud, right? So a little bit of Microsoft or Amazon or Google on the cloud computing side to extend our infrastructure. And there's also a private piece that we don't want to because from a privacy concerns, like you want to keep, although I'll be honest with you, try and hack a Microsoft or Google or Amazon, it's a little more difficult than hacking the government, right? Believe it or not, right? Everyone can be hacked, let's be honest with you. And no matter who you are, there is no ultimate protection against hackers. If they want to hack you, they're going to hack you, right? But there's still a little bit of being nervousness, if you will, or paranoia that if I extend or put user information on the cloud, somebody somewhere has access to it and they're going to steal our information, right? So this is the thing that stops us from going completely into this whole hybrid cloud, or you're going to see more and more of it as we go. So again, we have our Azure website, and we want it to auto-scale, right? So we have more end users, so it's going to pop up additional instances automatically as opposed to us throttling up manually. Manually is okay if you're small, but when you're big, you want this to happen as your demand spikes. As you can see, right? Lots and lots and lots of instances. And as it goes down, it scales back down again, right? So when in your peak, right, you can set it up so you can manage your peak times and so on. Set up a schedule where you can increase your capacity, increase the number of instances. And that's where that scale metric comes into play. You can also say, I want a minimum of this many instances at all times and a maximum of this many instances from a cost perspective, because maybe you can't afford. If it's slow, you might say. If I have that many users, you know what? I can't afford to go beyond this threshold. So we're only going to have this many instances. You can do that too, right? Because everything as you go higher, and there's your metrics. Below 60% you drop down, and when you go above 80% or whatever, as you approach 80%, you scale up. And you can check at different intervals. So let's say I have a website, and we have on the other side, if you notice on here, we have some GitHub as our version control system, or maybe Bitbucket. We have, or maybe Visual Studio Online. We use those as a deployment tool. And then from there, we have an Azure website, but we want to upgrade the website, right? Well, what we want to do is we want to stage our website in a separate instance, if you will. And then once we're done staging, what we want to do, right, is when we update our website to the latest version, right, when we're done, we want to be able to swap out that website and move from staging to deployment, right? Again, this is a great model because what you want to do is as you do revisions, right, we're going to do revising our website because let's face it, 99% of what we do on the web is revision work, right? Very rare do we come up with a new website from scratch. Typically we don't. We take what they have, the client, some content that they already have, and redeploy it, right? And we go into this next level website, right? And the way to do that, of course, is to have the staging area and swap it out. And if it doesn't work, if the deployment fails, you can always swap it back. This is something that's old school, but it allows you to do seamless transition. So if we're cutting over a weekend, sometimes you'd have to take your old site down and put your old site up, and then swapping back is a pain in the ass, right? Not so with Azure. Right, you can have your old site up, your staging area, swap these things around, and all of a sudden, now your domain is pointing at the new deployment zone. Here's an example of all the data centers. They have 14 data centers worldwide. They're getting some, from what I understand, this is Microsoft now. They're getting some in Canada. I think they're going to start deploying, I believe, in the west first, so Vancouver area. That's where they're going to start first. I don't think we're going to get one here in Toronto for a while, right, or in Barrie, this GTA area. And the reason for that is because of the proximity to Seattle, and I think they've got, because it'll also serve Seattle and other areas in the U.S. Again, they're primarily U.S. Station data centers, right? But we also have a bunch of them in Asia and so on. And again, there's some new ones that are coming up online in Australia and some other places like that. If you notice the blue dots, but they are servicing these areas. And why have all these data centers anyway? Well, imagine if I'm going to put up a website, don't I want that website to be as close to me as possible, right? The closer physically that data center exists to me, the less latency and the faster speed that I'm going to get, right? And that's the thing. What you can do is you can provision that website at any data center you want. That's really, really powerful stuff. And I'm not going to talk about this intelligent routing stuff, but what it does is it basically swaps. If one drops, like this one here, this one dropped off, it'll automatically route you to any other data center that's close, which is really cool. Again, 99.9999959s of availability. The only way that you can do that is with one of these big guys, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, right? Let's try this. I want to try and do this website now with you really quickly. We'll do that, and then we'll get into our lab for the last bit, right? Let's shut this one down, this deck. So let's go into it. We're here in Visual Studio, and I want to have, first of all, you have to be logged into your Azure account. If you notice, I'm logged in as me, right? If you're not logged in, you're going to be asked to do that in a second, okay? I want to start off a new project, right? Here's my new project. Let's try this together, right? Let's deploy an ASP.NET project, and we're going to call this, Web App 1. Right, here's Web App 1. And it's going to say sign in to renew my. I'm going to log into my Visual Studio for a second, right? So I'm using my Hotmail account for this one. And I use, you may have to do this. I use, especially if you don't do it right, that's always bad, right? When I'm logged in, right? If you notice, I'm on a pay-as-you-go account just as you. I can also use my Azure Pass. That's the way I want to go. I have an Azure Pass just like you do, right? So when you're logged in, you might see a different thing like this. I can also see where it says Add Application Insights to Project. For now, let's just turn that off if you see that option, right? If you notice, it dulls me out for a second, and that's okay. If I press OK, right, it's going to take me to this stage right here, right? New ASP.NET project. In the beginning, we asked you to do this one, empty, right? Today, I want you just to try web forms. Let's just add web forms in here, right? Yeah.
I don't see the login on my screen.
Don't worry. Let's go to this stage. That's what I'm saying. You may or may not see it. But you may see this. This is where I want you to get to, where it says host in the cloud. You see that option? Yep. So again, you have to choose your option. It says host in the cloud, Microsoft Azure. Are you guys good with this? All right. Now, I'm hosting this thing called Web App, right? It's a web app. Or I can host a virtual machine. I want to host it on a web app. That's what it's going to be, right? When it says change authentication, there's different ways of authenticating. I can create individual user accounts, organizational, or no authentication. Let's leave it as is, as no individual user accounts, right? And I want to press OK. When I press OK, right, what it's going to do is it's going to ask me information about the site that I'm creating. If you notice, it's going to give you your own name, like Web App 18579 is mine, right? And here's my subscription. I can choose pay-as-you-go or Azure Pass. I have two. I can set it up as my Azure Pass, right? You may not have an option like this. App Service Plan, right? I can create a new App Service Plan if I want, and I can call it whatever I want. Like, here's my examples form plan. My resource group, I can select a resource group, like for example, my default SQL East US, which is probably what I'm going to choose. And my region, if I have a region, it says, hey, there's a problem with my region. It says unable to get location information because I have a problem I have a conflict. It could be because, I don't know if you guys see of the same error. Do you?
Tom, we have I have a totally different screen.
Totally different screen? Okay, we'll go around in a second.
Site name,
Yeah.
region, database server, database username, and password.
Well, database server is going to be no database, right? So put that as no database,
Yeah.
right?
The region is it's giving me East US. That's the closest.
That's fine. I can also create a new service group if I want to, like my service group. Don't worry about that. The reason why I'm not getting a region is because I have connectivity issues today. For whatever reason. It's really weird. If I'm connected, to the podium, I'm having issues. If I disconnect, guaranteed it will work fine, right? If I don't want to do this, I can also choose cancel. And if I choose cancel, it'll still create my site for me here locally. So my local site. But I can always deploy to the cloud later, right? For you, if you deploy to the cloud, it'll actually show you how it's doing its deployment. If you notice, there's an overall status area down here where it says Azure App Service activity down here, right? And it won't be finished until you see this green or whatever. It might show you a green or a red. Now, if you notice all this extra stuff that you're getting here, right? So how do I check that? How do I check that I'm logged into Azure and everything else is working? Well, you can always go to manage.windowsazure.com to find out if your server was deployed properly. So now you're going to get this little login. Right? Here I am.
For me, it's showing you right here. It says creating Microsoft Azure website.
Yeah, you should get it because I have a problem with mine. You shouldn't have a problem with yours. Okay, so when I get in, I see this. I have one database that I've got into, but if I want to select all items, I can see I have a couple of web apps, right? This one that I was building last night, just to test. And if I want to shut this down, by the way, right now I have a couple of them that are the one that stopped. I want to stop this one, right? Okay, and if you notice, you should see your credit status at the top here as well. If you look, there should be a green bar that says credit status. Yeah? No? You may not see it then.
Do we have to register for Azure every month?
No. No, when you're in, right? All right, so now you should see your web app up here. When you go to web apps on the left, if you've deployed correctly, you should see yours come up. I'm going to disconnect from my podium and see if I can do it wirelessly. Sometimes it works better for whatever reason on the wireless than it does via the podium for whatever reason here at school. So give me a few minutes and I'll try this whole process again if you haven't seen this thing. All right, it did some weird thing there for me. Yay! Do you guys see that? Do you guys see your site? You guys should be seeing your site. On the right, where it says the URL, you can test your site out. Right now, there's a basic site that's been created. You can actually click on this URL, and it'll take you to the site if it's active. Right? I'm going to do it one more time so I can test it out for myself to make sure it works on my end. Of course, it always works at home, right? But when we come to school, when I'm demonstrating, it's got to fail, right? Because that's just the way it works for professors. But that's okay. So let me try this again. So I'm gonna do it from the beginning. So I've got my web application. I'll talk about adding it afterwards, but I want you to see the workflow first, like this, okay? So I'm gonna close off my solution. Here's my solution. I'm closing it off. I'm making another one, right? And it's okay to start again, by the way, right? It's okay. So here I am. I'm going to start this thing again, this whole process. Okay, so File, New, Project. If you guys had a problem doing it earlier, I'm going to choose ASP.NET Web Application, right? For the web name, I'm going to call it, let's call it Web App 2 this time, right? Because I did Web App 1 already. If you notice, I also have Create New Git Repository, so I'm already doing that as well. You might have add solutions to source control if you want to. I've clicked it on because I'm going to add a Git repository and press OK. I'm going to choose Web Forms because I want all this extra data to go through. I'm going to host in the cloud. It's going to be a web app, right? And I'm going to press OK, right? Now it's taking me here, right? And if it's giving me East US, take a look. So Reddy, you're right. I'm getting East US just like you did, right? East, you can choose whatever region you want. Again, remember we talked about you choosing a region. We're in the East. That's why it's choosing East US. We're not in the US, but our closest data center is East US.
It's choosing East US because you chose East US for your previous app. It defaults to not Europe.
I know that, but I'm saying you can choose whatever region you want, right? For us, East US is the closest. If I'm pay as you go, if I choose to Azure Pass, it's going to do the same kind of thing. I can choose whichever region I want because I have a pay as you go account as well. Here's my app service plan. All right, I can create a new one or accept one that's just there. I can also choose no database, right? So here's my new web app 24188, whatever it is, and I can press OK. If it says, hey, correct the errors that I got, where it says select a service plan, I'm going to create one, and I can create my service plan could be something like this. You know, example forms, example forms, right? And then I can select the default SQL US resource group if I want to. It doesn't matter. I can make my own. I'm going to press OK. If everything goes well, without creating a database, it'll create my new app online. And now it's this part here you should watch too, your overall status. Sometimes for whatever reason, at home I had sometimes it would fail if it was just a web app. But don't worry about it. We're going to do another one like this purely on the cloud. And when it's done deploying, again, what it's doing is it's deploying, pushing all this stuff out there, right? It's pushing all these things out there and deploying right away. And there we go. See, it says we're done. And then see how it says publish web app 2 to the web app now? I could do that again. Every time I'm ready, I can go down here to my Azure App Service and I can deploy again. I can publish. Now there's another tool to do it up here as well. We'll talk about that later on. But for now, if you notice, my configuration has changed. So locally, if I run it locally, it looks like this. Here's my local configuration when I run it. So I'm running it locally now. This is my local host. Just like we normally will run any web app, right? There it is. This is what you get with a full-blown web app that's a web forms app. You get login information. You get bootstrapping. So this is a bootstrap application. Here's my application name. You can change that. Here's my home, my about page. Gives me a little about page and a contact page that comes almost like a stub of a contact page. So this is all local. I want to see this remote. I'm going to go into Azure. Here's my Azure account. And if you notice, it updated automatically, right? And if you notice, it's running web app 24188, and it's in the East US. And if I click this little button over here, it's going to run this live. And it says, hey, it's deployed, right? Here it is. It says this app has been successfully created. Now I have to publish my app. So if I go back, I stop it, and where it says publish web app 2 to the web now, let's do that. It's going to bring up this publish web dialog, right? And it tells me here's my site. Here's my method is web deploy, right? There's different methods you can use too. I'm going to leave it at web deploy, right? Here's my password and all this other stuff. My username and password's automatic. I'm not touching anything, okay? And then I'm just going to click next for different options. My configuration, I can choose release or debug, right? Whatever suits you. Let's leave it as is right now. Release means I'm ready to deploy. I'm not in a debugging format at all, right? Yes?
I'm getting an error when I'm trying to launch it. When I say run, it gives me an IIS something error.
Online?
Yeah, on my local.
Oh, local. That's something else. That's another issue for you. We'll talk about that. Yeah, that's your own issue. That's something else you're doing. It says from a file publishing option, remove additional files at destination. It has all these other options. For now, I'm going to leave it as is. Default connection. I can use a connection string if I need to, or I can just press publish, right? When I do that, it's going to try and deploy, and you're going to see the deployment dialog down here happening. It says start web deploy, publish the application package to blah, blah, blah. And when it's done, it's going to actually send everything out. And when it's done, when I go to it'll automatically take me to my Azure site if it's completed. And you should see that same Azure website, that default that we saw earlier, which is this. So now we have full deployment online. Right? Are you guys seeing the same thing? So this is full circle. This is the way we do it. We deploy, right? We debug, and when we're ready, we deploy to the website. Okay, so if I was to check my Azure now, if I go back here and refresh, which I shouldn't have to do that, right? And I'll let it do its thing in a second. Here's my site. Here's pay as you go. These ones are stopped. This one's running, right? And it tells you where. It's using Azure Pass as an example. If I want to delete one, I have this one here, this Contact App 6000. I want to delete this one because I'm not happy with it. I can just press delete, right? If I don't want to, I just kind of get rid of it. And then what it'll do is it'll go through and deprovision or unprovision everything and remove this thing altogether. Here's a thing that you want to know. If you provision a VM, right, or anything like that, here's my virtual machine. If you notice, it's stopped. I called it Georgian VM, right? Why did I stop it? Because the longer I run these services, the more you get charged, right? So please don't forget to stop your VM and stop anything you don't want to be using for testing purposes, even for us, right? So now your websites aren't going to cost that much money, right? But VMs, they definitely don't eat at your $100 a month, right? So don't leave your VM running. Your VM, if you want to check it out at home, you can't do it here. It actually gives you this remote environment. You can create whatever VM you want. Okay, so that's how we did. That's one example of how we did a website by creating it here within Visual Studio. Let's do a website purely online. And I want to create a website that's, I want to do a WordPress site, okay? A brand new WordPress site that I want to do in 10 minutes with you, right? Let's see how we can do this. So we're going to go into Web Apps up here, right? And I want to do, if you notice down here on the bottom left, there is New. Let's click New, right? Now there's different options here, right? There's Quick Create, which allows me to create a new brand new web app really quickly. Or I can go down here to From Gallery, which is what I want you to pick. Pick From Gallery, right? Are you with me? Clicking From Gallery. Okay, now it's going to show you the gallery of different web apps you can pick. So of course I want to pick a CMS, right? Which that's what WordPress is. Let's see if there's WordPress down here. There's different ones, as you can see. You know, well, there it is, down at the bottom, under W, right? So I'm clicking WordPress. It tells me the latest version that we have, which is 4.22. That's the latest version of WordPress. It was just updated 5/10/2015. So it's been the latest version of WordPress. This is like a virtual appliance that I'm going to get. I'm going to create a brand new website, right, with a deployment stack and everything else right here. Okay, let's do this. Let's go next. Right, and here's my site. I'm gonna just choose a site. I'm gonna call this. I'm gonna see if I can call it Georgian College. And if it doesn't accept it, if it doesn't like the website, it'll say, "Man, it's not cool." I want to create a new MySQL database from a scalable. Hey, I got this one, guys. Right? Choose something else. Make your own. Example forms. Web scale group is the example forms. I can choose my own. Create my own. I can also use, right now it's using my Azure Pass, right? I can also have my own, if I have my own account, right? Here's my subscription type. You can choose Azure Pass, right? And I can put in a bunch of other things in here. My recommendation is you leave all of this alone. You don't need to put any of that stuff in there. Leave it as is and press next. Now it says, what's my new MySQL database? I can leave it as, you know, I'll call it Georgian College DB, right? Something that makes sense. And if it says 2 and 16 characters long, that's probably not long enough, or maybe too long. Right? East US is where it's going to be hosted. I agree to clear the this DB's terms. That's the type of DB I'm creating, and I'm going to complete. Now when I've done that, take a look. It's creating it. Right? It's deploying. Let's time it. From the time right now I'm looking at 12:31 or 12:30 on my clock. So from 12:30, I've just deployed my site with a few clicks. I could have done it faster. I was just taking my time so you guys could see it all. Right? And I'm going to create a brand new WordPress site out of the box. Right? This is great technology, guys. I have nothing to do. I don't have to worry about my PHP server on the back end. I don't have to worry about deploying or naming or using PHPMyAdmin to create my WordPress site. I don't have to any of this stuff. Like we talked about, this is truly platform as a service. It's all them, right? I just take care of my data stuff on my end. It takes care of the deployment details, the licensing, and keeping everything up to date on their end. It's beautiful, right? And again, by the way, even though I'm showing you Microsoft, please don't discount Google and Amazon. It's huge. They also have very cool deployment options. Okay, cool. Looks like I'm running, right? Let's check this out. georgiancollege.azurewebsites.com. It's going to take me into our .net. It's going to take me to my first setup for WordPress. Who's ever done WordPress before? Put their hand up. Okay. If you need, just follow along here. You should be up and running like me. It's right now. It's 12:32. It's took me 2 minutes to deploy my site, right so far. Are you with me? Are you where I am?
Yes.
Okay. Choose English and continue. Now you need to create a site title. I'm just going to call this Georgian College, right? You can call it whatever you want. Mine's going to be called Georgian College CMS, right? I have to create a username that I'm going to use. I'm just going to use my name. I typically use Thomas. You can use whatever you like. And then some kind of password that makes sense for you. Of course, I mismatched. There we go. My email address, right? Let's use my email address, my Hotmail account. There it is, right? And I can click, it says allow search engines to index this site. I don't really need that to happen. In a real site, you would say yes, right? And then install WordPress. If I've done everything correctly, I'll let it do its thing. So far, 3 minutes on the clock to deploy my crazy site. I won't save it. And I want to log in now to my backend. Here it is. So here's Thomas and my password. Hopefully I'll remember how to do that. And now I'm in. And I'm into a really cool dashboard that I get with WordPress from the get-go. And if I click here, this is actually what my site looks like from scratch. And I've got my first WordPress site, and it's under 5 minutes, 3 minutes. Now I can customize it. I can add plugins. I can use theming for my WordPress site. I can do everything I want within WordPress. I can make it fully responsive by choosing responsive theme, the whole bit, and it's 3 minutes. But you know what? I'm going to charge my customer $2,000. Yeah, you good? Why? Because they don't know this stuff, right? And you do, right?
There's a comment already.
Huh? What was that?
The comment is hello world.
Yeah, it's a hello world. Yeah, you can customize it. And the reason I'm being facetious, guys. When I say I'm going to charge my customer $2,000, the reason for this is obviously to make a true WordPress site. I'm making light of it, but you need to do customization here, right? This isn't just I'm not ready to deploy to customer right now. Hey, I'm ready to go, right? I don't want to do that. The idea here, what I want to try and show you is that from a deployment options perspective, I'm up in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. There's no way you could do this on your own if you did it with your own server or even a provider. It's impossible. But not so with Microsoft, Amazon, or Google. All right? So that's kind of it for my Azure kickoff today. I wanted to talk about that because you need to see what it looks like, right? I'm going to close some of these things down. One thing I do want to do is I've got this Georgian College WordPress site now. It's running. I'm not going to use it. I might use it for demonstration purposes later on. I'm going to shut it down, stop it, right? Because right now it's taking up your Azure pass points, right? Unless we need it right now for demonstration purposes, we don't need it. I'm going to shut it right down, right? I would recommend you do the same. Shut your stuff down so you don't eat up your money every month, right? Now you may not use 100 US, right? But I'm going to shut this other one down too. So I did a couple of them today, right? But you see, making websites, deploying websites is super easy. And if I want to point my domain, my custom domain to this site, it's super easy to do. You buy your domain from any registrar, point it to this website, and you're up and live. You're good to go. Yeah.
The same thing I should have done with the second, you just don't take it.
Okay, I will in a bit. Before we go. All right, that's it for Azure. Let's talk about your lab for today. All right, so I gave you a couple of labs. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll pause the movie and start up a new one. We only have a few minutes. We have about 20 minutes left, but I'll make it a small movie.